All right, shalom everybody. My name is Austin and you're watching the 144 Kids Shabbat recap on the Kids Action Bible Show. This is a series all about spiritual warfare, and today we're talking about the armor of YAH. Let's get into it. Roll it. So today we're talking all about the armor of YAH. We love this topic, and honestly, I believe everyone, especially if you're being trained up, should look into it to understand. It's critical in our faith when we're fighting against the schemes of the enemy. And so we're gonna dive more into the armor, and you're gonna understand why we're even talking about this at the end. So stay tuned at the end so you can see how we wrap it all up. So here are the enemies of the Ruach. We have spiritual forces, which are Hasatan, right? The adversary. Now let's just be clear. Adversary itself isn't a title. Hasatan, Satan, isn't the name of somebody. I'm sorry, it's only a title. It's not a name. And so we see these are the enemies of the Ruach, the spirit of what the Father might be calling us to do. And so one, we see the spiritual forces. We see Hasatan and his enemies, and we'll read about that in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. But we also see right here, the natural instincts, our flesh. We are also potential enemies against the Father's agenda, against the Father's commandments, his will. And you can see that even when Messiah looked at Peter and said, "Get behind me, Hasatan. Get behind me, Satan." What was he saying? He was saying, get behind me, you at this moment, who is an adversary to the plans of the Father. And so let's just be clear. When we're talking about Satan, we're not just talking about one person. We could be talking about ourselves. We could talk about someone else. When I say ourselves, I mean our flesh. And we could also be talking about these spiritual forces and wicked principalities that we'll dive more into in Ephesians chapter 6. So let's dive into the word to learn a little bit more. So here we have Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. It says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." You hear that? Our enemy is not flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and rulers of the darkness of this age. You see rulers circled. We're going to come back to it in a second. Against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. This is really identifying who the spiritual force is. Now, all of these are completely different. Principalities, powers, rulers, and spiritual hosts of wickedness. These are four different types of angelic, supernatural, demonic things that are opposing, that are the enemy, right? The scripture gives us a ton, but let's also take a look at something that Yeshua said about rulers. That's why we've highlighted this word. So let's head on over to the Gospel of John, or YAHUAH. So we see here in John chapter 12, verse 30 to 31, Yeshua answered and said, "This voice did not come because of me, but for your sake." And so he's talking about the voice from the Father, from the Most High. He's saying, this isn't about me, this is for you. Now the judgment of this world, now the ruler of this world will be cast out. We just saw that a second ago. Ephesians talked about what Messiah was talking about right here. The ruler of this world is going to be cast out. He's not talking about himself. He's not talking about the Most High. He's talking about these wicked spiritual forces. He's saying, hey, this is going to be cast out. And so Messiah recognizes there is a ruler of this world that is not following or not leading towards the Father's agenda. This is exactly what they were talking about in the letter that Paul wrote to the church of Ephesus about the rulers of this world, the principalities, the wicked forces, and spiritual principalities in high places. We see a direct connection here regarding Hasatan, the enemy, these spiritual forces. Now let's talk about that flesh side. Take a look right here, Galatians chapter 5, verse 17. "For the desires," I circled desires because we're going to see what Messiah says about this in a second. "The desires of the flesh are against the Ruach, the spirit, and the desires of the Ruach are against the flesh. For these are contrary to one another, so you do not do the things that you wish." And so whatever your flesh wants, your spirit wants the opposite. Whatever your Ruach wants, your flesh wants the opposite. They oppose one another. And see, as you can tell, according to this verse, our flesh is the enemy here. It says nothing about Hasatan, the fallen angels, the Nephilim. It says nothing about that. It says you, your flesh, your sinful nature, your natural instincts. These are the things that go against what the Spirit says. And so we can see how even ourselves can be that enemy against the Ruach. But let's take a look at what Messiah says. This is from the Gospel of YAHUAH, Matthew, chapter 16, verse 25. It says, "Then Yeshua said to his disciples, 'If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross.'" He's talking about denying his flesh and kill his flesh. If you want to follow me, you can't follow yourself and follow man. It says, "And follow me. For whoever desires to save his life Your flesh's desire is for comfort. It's to take care of itself. The desire of your flesh is to save its life. It's to live the best life. Live your best life. That's not the desire of the Spirit. That's not what Messiah says your desire should be. He says, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Whoever desires to save it will lose it. Whoever loses his life for his sake will find it. Why? Because you can't serve two masters. You can't serve what you want all the time and what the Father wants. You have to serve one or the other. And so our entire lifetime is this journey of trying to figure out how can we walk and apply and make sure that we're being led by the Spirit and we're not being led by our own desires. That's the hard part. So like I said, the enemies of the Ruach, now there might be more, but we're just doing a high level overview. The enemies of the Ruach can be put into these two categories. Number one, we have the spiritual forces of Hasatan and Satan and heavenly angels. If you want to learn more, check out Daniel chapter 10. There's a great conversation between Daniel and this messenger, this angel, and how the angel is describing how their spiritual forces kept him from coming to Daniel, right? It's a great example. Or also, ourselves, our natural instinct in our flesh. Everything isn't Hasatan. Sometimes it's just you. You're the problem. I'm the problem. And we need to recognize that, and we need to make sure that we fight that spiritual battle with spiritual weapons. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to get into that in a second. So now, we know the enemy, but do we know how to fight? Let's take a look. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, it says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in Elohim, mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. Now, we don't have enough time to talk about strongholds today, but I want you to pay attention here. The weapons that we use are not fleshly, earthly weapons. No, it's not. It's not just drink this drink or go to this therapy session. Everything, our weapons are not of flesh. It's not anything that we can just grab and hold on to, right? For most people, if you break into my house, this is a weapon I can grab. This is not what he's talking about. He says spiritual weapons. Let's look a little bit more about it. So this is a great example. Let's go all the way back to David when he fought that extra big Philistine with Nephilim blood, Goliath. Let's read it together. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 44 through 45. It says, and the Philistine, referring to Goliath, said to David, come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. I don't know, that's just how I think Goliath would probably talk. Come to me and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the beasts in the air and the beasts of the field. And David said to the Philistine, Goliath, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, all carnal weapons. But I come to you in the name of YAHUAH Tesavot, in the name of Yah of hosts, or Lord of hosts, and the Elohim of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Check this out. This is incredible. David recognizes that Goliath is coming with brute strength. He's coming with sheer size in a corrupted bloodline. But David realizes this is a spiritual battle. You come to me with weapons with earthly weapons. I'm coming to you with a spiritual weapon. I'm coming to you in the name of the Father. Why? Because there's nothing more powerful than his name. I'm coming to you in the name of YAHUAH, the Lord of hosts, YAHUAH Tesavot, the Elohim of Israel's armies. He responded. He said, this battle is a spiritual one. Now, in verse 46, the next verse, he does talk a little greasy. He does say like, hey, I'm going to kick your butt. But he immediately responds with understanding that this is a spiritual battle, that his weapons are not carnal. Now, he did use a carnal weapon, but the carnal weapon came second. The spiritual weapon came first. So like I said, Goliath came with carnal weapons and David came with spiritual ones. Spiritual weapons, which one weighs more? Which one carries more weight? Earthly weapons, carnal weapons, or spiritual weapons? I think we know the answer to that. Let's dive a little bit more into Israel's weapons. We understood who the enemy is. We're learning how to fight. We know how to fight. Now let's talk about what weapons do we have to fight with. Let's take a look. So this is where we get back to that Ephesians chapter 6 verse. Let's read it together. It says, put on the whole armor of Elohim. Don't just leave some of it out. If you don't trust me, like look into some other mythologies, look at Achilles. Don't leave anything out. Put on the whole armor, right? You don't go outside without putting pants on. You don't go outside without putting a shirt on, hopefully. Put on the whole armor. right? That you may be able to stand against the wiles of the adversary. Why? This is the verse that we just read. Because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly high places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of Elohim, that you may be able to withstand evil in the day, and having done all to stand. It says it twice in here. You put on the whole armor so you can stand against the schemes of the enemy. So you can stand against the attacks of Hasatan, the enemy. This is why you put on the whole armor. You put on the whole armor so you can stand against the enemy, whether it be a spiritual ruler or yourself. You have to make sure you're armored up. Let's keep reading. Stand, therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having ready your feet with the gospel of peace, the basor of shalom, the shoes of shalom. Above on, take the shield of faith, which you will be able to quench the fiery darts of the wicked one. And having take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is Yah's word, which is the word of Elohim. So good. So here are the weapons. Here are the weapons that we have, the armor that we have in this spiritual fight. We have the belt of truth. We have the breastplate of righteousness. We have the shoes of shalom, the shoes of peace. We have the sword of the Ruach, which I'm standing in front of, Yah's word. We also have the helmet of salvation and the shield of faith. Now, all of this is fighting against the fiery darts of the enemy, the fiery darts of the enemy. And so this is so important to make sure we understand how this works. And so we'll talk about it more in a practical sense, but this is important. Take a look. This is our armor, and the enemy has its weapons. I'm telling you, the enemy never runs out of fiery arrows. We need to make sure we have our armor on at all times, as much as we can. So, why is this important? Why is the concept of spiritual warfare even relevant? Why are we talking about this on 144 Kids, on the Kids Action Bible Show? Great question. We talk about this because we need to stay on guard. Why? Because we need to be aware and vigilant of anything that keeps us from being set apart and might cause us to sin or transgress Yah's commands. To do that, we need to test everything with scripture so we can be set apart and not with the world. Because there's a lot of things that look good, that would seem okay, that didn't seem like that big of a deal in the world. You know, a little bit of magic here, a little bit of witchcraft there, a little bit of pagan celebration here. No. That gets us in trouble. Just take a look at Israel. Israel got in trouble just for intermarrying outside of these other races. Why? Because these races did very detestable practices. If you want to understand that, look into the book of Ezra. It's a great writing on why being set apart is so important. We're going to talk about that coming in a couple weeks. But we need to make sure we know how to fight. We know who the enemy is, how to fight, and what our weapons are, because we don't want anything to get in the way, to slow us down, or to ruin our testimony, anything like that. When we are trying to follow the Father and his commands and chase after him, we want to make sure that we are good to go. And the only way we can do it is if we're ready to fight. Now remember, not with earthly weapons. This is my toothbrush. But not with earthly weapons, with spiritual weapons. Why? Because we fight spiritual battles with spiritual weapons. Spiritual battles, spiritual weapons. You get it? Yes, I know you do. So with that said, we covered a lot. Take a look at these questions. Take some time. See if you can answer them for yourself. I'll give you a minute. All right, so that wraps up our Bible study, but because of that, we also need to go into some artwork that was sent in from some of the family in 144 Kids. So check this out. This is the story of Moshe being sent down the river, Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 through 7. This is from Maddie and Ruby. You can see how they did the palm trees, how they have the pyramid, the rocks from outside. They did a great job on their diorama on the November Art Challenge. Well done, Maddie and Ruby. Let's take a look at Luma's. So Luma did an awesome diorama on Rahab and the spies. You can see even the hay on top of the wall that the spies hid in, and then Rahab let them down the wall, and they went and held out in the wilderness for 3 days until the people stopped looking for them, and then they head back to camp to let Joshua know we can take this place. Well done, Luma. This is such a great diorama. And next, we have a diorama from one and only Ali, the cow, and how he created this diorama based off of Moshe receiving the tablets on Mount Sinai. So let's check that out.
This is Moshe. and the 2 tablets are in his hand, and this is the mountain I made in my diorama. These are the people who's watching. Moses is showing the people what is on the 10 Commandments. And I got some of the outside stuff. Moss and rocks. And you can see that I made the clouds out of some other stuff. I made the clouds out of tissue paper, actually. And the mountain is out of some other stuff in clay. And Moses, his eyes are rocks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the Kids Axel Bible Show. Thank you. Shalom.
And our next one, we have from the one and only Old Man Vinny. Yes, he did an awesome diorama on a story that we covered today, David and Goliath. Check this out. Goliath's arm looks like a limp noodle. I love it, Vinny. This is awesome. Look at this.
This is David and Goliath. And here's his sword, his shield, his armor on his legs and arm. And here's David with his sling thing. And Goliath was, I think, 12 to 13 feet tall, and David was 5 feet tall. And then David got a stone and threw it at Goliath, and then he got knocked out, and then David went over and finished the job. And that is the story of David and Goliath.
All right, and that wraps us up. Thanks so much for joining 144 Kids. I appreciate it. If you want to learn more how to support us or just what this ministry is about, go to 144kids.org and you can find all of our information there, or shoot us an email at 144kids@gmail.com. With that said, we love you guys. Peace be with you, and shalom. See you on the next one.